I got hired in hell. Today I learned how things really work. Part 4. I had fully intended to quit. I had planned on meeting Melvin by the river that evening and telling him no, I couldn't do this. No, this was not the kind of career I wanted in my 30s. I'm not sure if this meant they'd have to dispose of me somehow, as I already knew too much of the workings of heaven and hell and couldn't be released back into the mortal world. I woke up at 8:15. I quickly showered, made toast, and fastened my pink work blouse up to my neck. There was a thick blanket of fog covering the ground outside. Fat purple and black tinsel garlands lined the courtyards of the houses on the street. The windows were decorated with a menagerie of wispy cotton spiderwebs and jelly stick-on letters that spelled Halloween. It was Halloween today, my 30th birthday. The chaos of my new job and its time-bending nature had caused me to lose track of the days completely. I panicked, heat rising in my chest and face prickling, then reminded myself I wasn't technically 30 yet, since I was born at 8:27 at night. I had a few hours yet before the new decade set in on me, with all of this ingrained expectation and rites of passage. With the stress of my new job in hell still gnawing at me, I entered the glass encasement of my old job with resentment. I sat at the computer cross-referencing the emails on the mailing list with a handwritten list I had made from a meeting last week. My eyes darted between the screen and page, having to check several times over because I could no longer make sense of the symbols. Rob, my coworker, came over tentatively. He was clutching his coffee mug like a shield again. "Happy Halloween," he said awkwardly, trying to wriggle his fingers at me like Nosferatu, but his mug got in the way, and he looked instead like he was having a fit of tremors. "Yeah, right," I nodded. "Happy Halloween." "You're looking tired today. Big night last night?" "It was, actually, yeah," I said, neglecting to mention how last night had involved barging into a family home and ferrying a boy to hell. "You on the lash tonight again, then?" he asked. I was unsure if he was asking because he knew it was my birthday, or just asking because he thought everyone was binge drinking for Halloween. "No, not really. Just a quiet one, if anything," I said, looking back down at my screen. Yeah. "Look, when you send out the newsletter this week, could you just add this in there somewhere?" he said, handing me a neon post-it note he had scribbled on. "No bother," I said, sticking it on my desk without reading it. I squeezed out of the office 10 minutes early, which was unusual for me, but no one raised any questions. The twilight was enveloping the city earlier and earlier these days, and I couldn't afford to miss my meeting with Melvin, Hell's regional manager, at sundown. I ran home, flying up the stairs while simultaneously unbuttoning my pink work blouse. I was stripped down to my bra when my boyfriend Derek slammed open the door. "Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you," he sang in his deep, drawling, melodic voice. He was precariously carrying a white iced queen cake with a wax candle stuck in the middle of it. "Happy birthday, dear Sarah." He presented the cake in front of me with a flourish. I blew out the candle without wishing for anything. "God, don't remind me," I laughed. The big 3-0. I can hardly stand it. "Where are you rushing to?" he asked as I peeled off my work trousers and pulled on a pair of black leather leggings that clung to my skin. "Work," I said. "You just came from work, though." "Other work," I whispered, rolling my eyes. "I thought you were going to go on strike or something," Derek whispered back forcefully. "I mean, what they're making you do isn't fair," he said. "I know, I am," I said. "I just have to talk to Melvin. Get this sorted out once and for all." "Do you still want to get that drink later?" "Yeah, of course. I'll have plenty of time," I said. After all, my job in hell existed only in a time warp. No time would pass between me arriving at sundown and me finishing my shift. A brisk, slanted rain was misting the footpaths outside. Droplets lay suspended in my hair, making it damp and spiky. I headed to the designated meeting spot, the flickering streetlight on the bank of the river. It was shorting out worse than usual this night, making mechanical buzzing sounds as it flashed on and off. I stood underneath it and rehearsed my plan. I would meet Melvin here and tell him I would not make another house call. I would tell him how wrong it felt to be sending these people to hell. There must be a mistake in his case files or in the whole hierarchical system in hell. In fact, I would demand to be put in contact with whoever was his higher-up. I flinched slightly when I realized that might mean the devil. How would I go about my mortal life if I had seen the incarnation of evil? I imagined him to be covered in a pitch-black tar substance that dripped from his body except for his white, pupilless eyes. I shivered at the thought of being so disgusting. My discomfort was interrupted when someone appeared in front of me. I hadn't heard her coming. She was a short girl, barely up to my shoulders, with long auburn hair hanging in a ponytail that went down to the back of her thighs. "Are you the one I'm supposed to be meeting?" she asked. Her top teeth were crooked. "Depends," I said. I realized I wasn't wearing my mask. "Do you have something for me?" I asked. Yeah, I think." The girl shuffled uncomfortably from one foot to the other. I had hoped Melvin would meet me before anyone showed up to be ferried to the other side. I hesitated, thinking if I should take her or not before I'd gotten a chance to voice my frustrations. It didn't seem like much could be done now. "Open your mouth and lift your tongue," I instructed her. I held my breath in anticipation until I saw the gold coin nestled between her teeth. There would be no need to make another house call. I flipped it in my hands and saw the pentacle etched on the back. She was going to heaven. There was no harm in taking her before I got the chance to talk to Melvin. I loaded her into the boat and began the slow, drawling journey down the river. I took care to appreciate each moment of the journey, expecting it might be the last one before I quit this job. I savored the slow, caressing movements of the waves and how they parted as I dragged my oar through them. I appreciated the timeless mist on the quays that made the city seem like a hazy memory. After all, it was kind of a final mirage to the people I ferried before they set eyes on their eternal scenery, whatever that was. As we reached the mouth of the river, I saw the other boat dancing on the water in the distance. The angel was standing on the front of it, stoic and calm. I wasn't sure if the angel was really an angel. Maybe they were just a human like me, dressed up in their square masks that looked like a welder's helmet, and their tinny reflective wings. Regardless, I found their presence more intimidating than ethereal. It was their permeating silence that always reminded me I was part of something bigger than myself, and I had no idea how it worked. Today, however, they broke their silence. "They're not mine," the angel said. It was a man's voice, high-pitched and unassuming. "What do you mean?" I said, rowing closer. "She's not mine. She wasn't on the list," he said as he pointed to the girl in the back of the boat. "But she had a coin." "Let me see," he said. I reached in my pocket and handed it over. He flipped it between his fingers and ran over the pentacle with his nail. Finally, he shook his head. "Counterfeit," he said quietly. "Someone else has carved the pentacle in here." I took the coin back and looked at it in disbelief. The circle enclosing the star was warped, and there were minuscule scratches that looked like they had been etched by a knife. I cursed myself for being so stupid. I turned to the girl in the back of the boat. "Did you do this?" I asked. She stared at me wide-eyed and shook her head. "What do I do?" I asked the angel. He shrugged. "I don't know. It's your call. It's your decision to make now." I nodded solemnly. "Can you just give me 2 minutes?" I asked. He nodded, his mask glinting as it moved up and down. I used my oar to push off his boat and paddle away so the girl and I could have some privacy as I made my decision. When we were far enough away, I put the oar down and lowered myself to a seat at the front end of the boat. The water surrounded us on all sides. It was soft and rippled like an indigo blanket, slowly undulating in the twilight mist. This girl had nowhere to run, and she could only answer to me now. "Did you carve the pentacle on the coin?" I asked. "I didn't, I swear. I didn't even know what it is. It was given to me like that." She shook her head furiously so her brown rope of hair swung lifelessly in front of her face. Her skin looked dry and raw. "Who gave you the coin?" I asked. "It was just there when I woke up." She looked down at her feet in the boat. "I was in a car wreck. It was 4 of us. My boyfriend was driving. He sped around a turn and crashed us into a wall. I don't remember realizing what was happening. It was so dark, she said. She wiped away tears with the sleeve of her jumper, which only made her skin redder. But I woke up and I was laying on the grass on the opposite side of the road. My boyfriend was with me. He was standing. He had his coin in his hand, and I was going to ask him what happened, but I felt something in my mouth, and I pulled it out. It was the coin. I tried yelling to my friends, still trapped in the car, but they couldn't hear me. Couldn't hear me at all, and I shouted and shouted. Then this man in a trench coat came out of nowhere and told me they couldn't hear me and couldn't see me anymore, and I had to come down to the river to meet you. I waited for my boyfriend, but he wouldn't come with me. Mm-hmm, I nodded. I looked at her for a second. She pressed into her hairline with her fingers, shielding her eyes. Do you believe in heaven? I asked. Of course I do, she said. What about hell? She paused for a moment, studying me. I guess, yeah. Which one do you think you should go to? I asked. I've never done anything wrong, she cried. I deserve to go to heaven. I'm not a bad person. I remembered as a child the morning I'd spend with my grandfather, where he'd wake me up before my parents to take me fishing. If it was a clear day, the sun would rise as a red disk casting vibrant reflections along the river. I would sit on a cloistered grassy bank and balk in disgust as my grandfather tried to get me to stick bits of worms onto the hook. If he caught anything, he'd place my hands on the reel as he lured the fish in. I would always gasp in excitement to feel the resistance in the line, straining so much I thought it might break. He'd always let me decide whether we would release the fish back into the river or bring it home and gut it. I'd hold the fish in my two cupped hands as it flipped back and forth. It was remarkable how strong they were, like a slate of solid muscle, contracting and releasing. I don't remember how I made the decisions. It may have been based on how much they struggled, or how pretty their chromatic scales looked in the dawn, but I knew I never doubted myself when I damned them to choke on the air. I stood up in the boat and began to row, not saying another word to the girl. I had made my decision. I rowed past the Angel, out into the sea, where I began to hear the familiar deafening crashing of waves. The water parted, revealing the pitch-black crevice that pushed our boat back into the waves as it widened. The sea poured into it from both sides, though no mist rose up from its depths. You're going there, I said to the girl, pointing at the black void in the middle of the water. Where does that go? She asked. I'm not entirely sure myself, I said, only a white lie. But that's where you have to go. She seemed to trust me, thinking she'd won me over with her story. I offered her my hand, which she took. She approached the edge of the boat and hesitated for a second, then plunged into the darkness, hugging her knees to her chest on the descent. Her long brown hair stuck to her back in the airless abyss. I rode away, rejoining the Angel. Why did you send her to hell? He asked. She was driving when the car crashed, and then she tried to steal her boyfriend's coin when she found out that's what you need to get into heaven. How did you know whether she was telling the truth or not? The Angel asked. I shrugged. I just knew. I took the journey back to the city slow and languidly. It was my intention to waste time, but time could not be wasted if it did not exist. When I pulled in next to the flickering street lamp, I saw a small man in a long coat silhouetted by the flashing light. Melvin, my boss. You wanted to speak with me? He said as I lifted myself out of the boat and onto the murky stairs that were half submerged in the river. I did, I said. Well, let's hear it then. He took a pack of pre-rolled cigarettes from his pocket and lit one. His bald head shone blue in the light. A shiver ran through my whole body. I'm very uncomfortable with some of the situations I've been put in for this job. Yeah? He grunted. I had to make a house call yesterday for that missing coin. I didn't feel like it was fair to terrorize those people like that. And tonight the Angel, or whatever he is, made me choose whether to send this girl to heaven or hell. I don't even know if I'm qualified enough to make that kind of decision. And I don't know who is making the decisions for all this. God or the devil or whatever. But it just doesn't seem fair. The words were flowing tumultuously now. I had no control over what I was saying, just desperately trying to get it all out. Melvin knit his eyebrows together in a look of concern as he puffed on his cigarette, his blunt lips forming a disgruntled O shape. He exhaled 2 streams of smoke through his nostrils like a dragon. "Let me tell you something," he said, putting his hands in his pockets. "Now, I'm not sure if you've picked up on this yet, but there is no God. There is no devil. Regular people like you and me run this whole thing." I felt a bit winded, as if he had slapped those words into my chest and they were stamped there, burning into me. "Surely there has to be something greater that decides people's fate," I said. "Nope. The director of hell is a man named George, from Sheffield. He deals with the hard cases, so to speak, but most cases are pretty simple." How are they simple?" He shrugged. "We have a steering group that meets every quarter. They update the criteria for heaven and hell and train management to handle the cases." "What if someone has a different idea of what's right or wrong? Like, if something warrants someone to go to hell or not?" Melvin rocked back and forth on his feet and shrugged again. "Then it's up to the steering group to reach a consensus. That's how business works. Morality is subjective, I suppose, but we have to make decisions. We have to keep everything running." "But what if the decision is wrong? Isn't that why there's supposed to be a higher power? Like..." "You're not getting this, Sarah," he said. "There's no higher power than you in this world. There's no higher power than me. There's no higher power than that lad walking across the street." He pointed over the bridge enthusiastically. "You have the power to make these decisions. There's nothing greater in this world. Nothing with more authority." He enunciated each word with relish. "Trust yourself. If it's not you making the decision, it'll be someone else. Don't doubt yourself. You never doubted yourself when you chose which fish would live and which ones would die. This is no different." I looked at him, puzzled. The wind felt cold and abrasive against my bare hands. "But what about the magic?" I asked. "The stopping of time, and the coins, and everything." Melvin tilted his head and gave me a sly smile. "Come on now," he said. "It's only magic because you think it is. Sure, we could all be clairvoyant and see the dead if we wanted to." I nodded. He dropped the butt of his cigarette in a fluorescent puddle, and it sizzled as it absorbed the water. "Any other questions for me?" he asked. "Not really," I said. "Well, your probationary period is well over," he said, putting his large, square hand on my shoulder. "You've proved yourself. Welcome to the team." "Thanks," I whispered. Melvin smiled and winked at me. He retreated into the dark streets until all I could see of him was the blue lights glinting off his shiny trench coat. My ears were ringing. My skin buzzed with energy. I walked over the bridge into the city, appreciating the authoritative clacking of my boots against the wet concrete. Over the river, the town radiated with neon signs and the headlights of taxis. Many people were out for Halloween, even though it was a Monday. A man with a pumpkin on his head stood under a red awning outside a bar, smoking through the jagged mouth carved into his mask. Girls in taut leather skirts and ankle boots swarmed the entrance to the bar. People moved through the streets in one organic and synchronized current. I looked at each of their faces, trying to memorize them all as I imagined how I would one day take each of their hands as they crossed over to the other side. I made my way to the bar I agreed to meet Derek at after work. There was a bouncer outside who asked to see my ID, less out of flattery and more out of protocol, I thought. "Well, happy 30th, he said gruffly as he handed it back to me, eyeing my date of birth. "Thanks," I said. I had to push my way past the front of the bar where gangly university students were tripping over each other as they tried to order drinks. I spotted Derek in the back at a round table crowded with foamy pint glasses. He wasn't alone. A handful of our college friends swarmed the table. They all jumped up when they spotted me. "Surprise!" my old housemate Claudia shouted. Her cheeks were flushed. "Oh, Claudia, thank you," I said as I hugged her. You look so good! I love the outfit, she said, gesturing up and down to my uniform of all black. You know, I'm a child of the night or whatever, I said, winking at her. She laughed. I went around the table offering hugs and replaying my surprise until I got to Derek. Happy birthday again. I hope you don't mind a little surprise, he said as he kissed me softly on the mouth. This is great. You didn't have to, I said. I need to talk to you, though. He pulled away and looked at me, scanning my face for concern. Are you okay? Did something happen tonight? He asked. No, I'm grand. I just wanted to update you on, the whole work situation. Oh, right, he whispered. He looked over his shoulder at our friends happily chatting. Shall we talk about it in the smoking area? He asked. The wooden benches of the smoking area were damp and cold, even though the red heat lamps illuminated the side of the building. The air was crisp and dewy, but was muddled with the smell of tobacco and fruity vapor. I talked to my boss, I started, and he explained everything to me, how things work, and he said they're happy to keep me on. Derek nodded attentively. I was also thinking about what you said, how I have a real power to make a difference in this job, and it's true, I do. And I trust myself to make these hard decisions, because if it's not me, who else? I shrugged. Do you think you'll be able to handle it, though, long term? Derek asked me. I'm sure there'll be some days I don't want to do it, like any job, really. But I'm tough stuff. I beat on my chest with my fist, which made Derek chuckle. I can handle it, I said. Derek put his arm around me and reached over to grab my hand. I believe you, he said. I don't think it's wrong or anything. It's like you said, someone has to do that job. And when I die, I wouldn't want it to be anyone else but you. He landed a soft kiss on my shoulder. I won't tell a soul, he whispered playfully. I laughed. The night passed effortlessly, buoyed on by a light drunken air. My friends took turns buying me pints of stout and cocktails of their choosing until my head felt muddled and warm. Derek and I went up to the rooftop smoking area, long after everyone was gone, to get some air. No stars were visible behind the dark, inky clouds and smog of the city. The moon, however, cautiously lit up a ring of passing clouds. Do you feel any different, though? Derek asked, elbowing my arm gently. Not really, I said. I don't think I changed much in my 20s anyway. I just realized a lot more things. Words of wisdom, he remarked. We arrived home around 5 a.m. After the bar, we spent the morning hours swaying around city streets until we finally submitted to eating takeaway slices of pizza on the sidewalk and starting the long walk home. My drunkenness was fast fading into the early stages of a migraine, and I nursed it with a cup of tea. I sat at the kitchen table as the sun spread its soft, diffused fingers of light through our windows, unwilling to go to bed. After a couple hours of mindlessly staring, I dusted my jacket off and put my boots back on before departing on a familiar walk. My hair smelled of cigarette smoke as the morning humidity dampened it. I pulled it into a loose bun as I approached the door to my office. "Oh, Sarah, you're in earlier than usual," my boss, Jen, said as I walked to her desk. "Yeah, about that. I'm actually here to pick up some of my things because, well, I have to quit," I said. "Sorry." Her miniature mouth twisted into a contrived frown. "Well, the 2 weeks notice period would be appreciated, but I suppose if it's an immediate thing..." "It's just I found a position somewhere else," I rushed. "One with additional responsibilities, more in line with my career goals, and, well, the pay's better, frankly." "Right," Jen said. "In that case, I'll have some paperwork ready for you when you're done getting your things." I began cleaning out my old work desk, crumpling post-it notes and torn-off bits of paper. "Sarah, I like the black," Rob said, awkwardly clutching his coffee mug as always. "What's going on? Are you leaving?" "Yeah, unfortunately," I said. "I found something else. Short notice." "Oh no, so I won't be seeing you around here anymore." "I'm afraid not," I said as I loaded my paper files into a box. I stood up and gave him a sly smile. But don't worry, I'll definitely see you when your time comes.